Hello, my dear listeners. Please write in the comments which city or country you are listening to us from. And don't forget to subscribe and like. Enjoy the listening. Dixon Hunt sat in a leather chair in the penthouse in the heart of New York City, gazing at the flickering lights of the night city through the panoramic windows. In his hands, his phone trembled, for the first time in 8 years of his professional career. The call he had just ended turned his entire life upside down in a matter of minutes. "Mr. Hunt," a voice spoke from the speaker of his laptop. On the screen appeared the face of Marcus Stone, the president of the American Mixed Martial Arts League, a man who could destroy any career in the fighting world with a flick of his finger. "I think you understand why I'm calling." Dixon ran his palm over his face, feeling cold sweat trickle down his back. Just an hour ago, he had been an unbeatable champion, a hero to millions, a man with contracts worth $80 million. Now he realized that his empire could crumble faster than he could blink. "Marcus, let me explain." "Explain what?" Stone leaned closer to the camera, his eyes burning with cold fury. "That you publicly humiliated a man who was once my mentor? That you turned our sport into a circus? Or that you made us all look like fools?" Dixon closed his eyes, recalling the events of the previous evening. It all started so innocently. The press conference after his victory over Jacob Miller, a fighter he had knocked out in just a minute and a half. Journalists were asking the usual questions. Cameras were flashing. He felt like the king of the world. "Dixon, is there anyone else you would like to call out for a fight?" asked a reporter from ESPN. He was supposed to respond diplomatically. He should have thanked his opponent, his coaches, the fans. But the alcohol from the victory banquet and the adrenaline from the triumph took their toll. "You know what?" he said, smirking at the camera. "I've beaten all the legends of this sport. Everyone except for one old actor. Steven Seagal thinks he's tough because he starred in action movies 30 years ago. Wants to get famous at my expense? Let him come. I'll send him where he belongs. To the nursing home." The room erupted with laughter. The cameras eagerly captured every word. And Dixon continued, intoxicated by the crowd's reaction. "Seriously, Steven, if you still have enough testosterone to make it to the octagon without a walker, come on. I promise to finish quickly so you can make it to your evening pill intake." Now, sitting in the darkness of his penthouse, Dixon understood the magnitude of his mistake. Steven Seagal was not just an ordinary actor. At 70 years old, he remained one of the most respected martial arts masters in the world. A 7th-degree black belt in Aikido, a former Special Forces instructor, a man who had spent 50 years of his life studying the art of combat. "Dixon," Stone's voice grew even colder, "Steven just sent me an official response to your challenge. Want to hear it?" Dixon nodded, although every cell in his body screamed no. Stone began to read. "Marcus, tell this boy that I accept his challenge. A charity match, all proceeds will go to the families of veterans. 1 round, MMA rules. Atlantic City, next Saturday. And tell him, he better bring a good dentist." Dixon's heart skipped a beat. He thought the 70-year-old actor would simply ignore his words or respond through social media. But Steven Seagal was from a different generation, a generation that resolved conflicts face to face. "Marcus, listen." "No, you listen to me," Stone interrupted him. "You have a choice. Either you fight him and we present this as an exclusive event, or you refuse and look like a coward in front of the whole world. There is no third option." Dixon stood up and walked to the window. Below, on the streets of Manhattan, ordinary people lived their ordinary lives, unaware of the drama unfolding in the penthouse above their heads. He remembered his childhood in Detroit, where he grew up without a father, in a house where the electricity was cut off every other month. Boxing became his ticket out of poverty. MMA made him a millionaire, and now one foolish phrase could ruin everything. "What are the terms?" he asked quietly. "A charity fight at Boardwalk Arena, 1 round lasting 15 minutes. All proceeds from the broadcast go to charity, no fees for the fighters. And Dixon," Stone paused, "if you lose to the old man, your career is over. Do you understand that?" "Yes," Dixon replied, feeling his world start to crumble. "I understand." After the call ended, Dixon was left alone with his thoughts. He turned on the television, flipping between news channels. The story was already gaining traction. "Arrogant champion calls out a legend. Battle of the generations. youth versus experience. Headlines blared across all sports publications. But the worst were the comments on social media. Fans who had worshipped him just yesterday were now calling him a disrespectful jerk. Videos of his remarks had garnered millions of views, and most commentators were not on his side. Finally, someone will put this arrogant guy in his place. Steven will crush him like an ant. Don't mess with the legend, kid. Such comments were predominant. Dixon tried to call his father, but remembered that he had left the family when he was 12. His mother had died 3 years ago from cancer, never witnessing his greatest victories. The only close person left was his younger sister, Jessica, who worked as a nurse in Detroit. "Dixon, what are you doing?" were Jessica's first words when she answered the call. "I saw the news. Have you completely lost your mind?" "Jess, No. Mom would cry if she saw what you've become," she continued, and her words struck harder than any blow in the octagon. "She was so proud of you. Told all the neighbors that her son was a real gentleman, a well-mannered fighter, and you're acting like a street thug." Dixon sat down on the couch, feeling tears welling up in his eyes. "I didn't mean to. It just slipped out. I was drunk on victory." Steven Seagal taught Mom self-defense at the community center when she was diagnosed with cancer, Jessica said quietly. "For free. He came every Saturday from his home in the mountains to help women who were afraid to go outside in our neighborhood. He's a saint, Dixon, and you humiliated him." This information hit Dixon like lightning. He had no idea about this side of Steven Seagal's life. The media portrayed him as a Hollywood star who starred in action films from the 80s and 90s. But it turned out that behind the scenes, he was involved in charity, helping people, making the world a better place. "Jess, I'll fix this. I'll find a way." "How? You've already said too much. Now you'll have to answer for your words." She paused. "Mom always said, a person's character is revealed not when he wins, but when he loses. Let's see what your character is like." After the conversation with his sister, Dixon couldn't sleep. He paced the penthouse, trying to find a way out of the situation. Maybe apologize publicly? But that would look like weakness after accepting the challenge. Maybe pretend to be injured, but that would ruin his reputation forever. The next morning, the situation got even worse. His agent, Richard Koss, sent a text message. 4 major sponsors have already terminated contracts. Nike is considering. Call urgently. Dixon met with Richard in his office in Midtown. Koss was a tall, thin man with gray hair and cold blue eyes. A typical Hollywood agent who could sell his soul for the right price. "Dixon, I have to be honest with you," Koss said, not offering a seat. "This situation is a disaster. Corporate America doesn't want to associate with someone who publicly humiliates elderly people." "Richard, it's just one fight." "No," Koss shook his head. "This isn't just a fight, it's a test of character. And if you lose to a 70-year-old man, your career will end not just in the octagon. No one will want to associate with a loser who couldn't beat a senior citizen." Dixon sank into the chair, feeling helpless for the first time in many years. "What if I win?" "If you win by beating an old man, you'll become the most hated person in America," Koss replied coldly. "It's a no-win situation, Dixon. You've backed yourself into a corner." In the following days, Dixon immersed himself in studying his opponent. What he discovered made him regret every word he had said at that press conference. Steven Seagal was born in Chicago to a working-class family. At 17, he began studying Aikido under a Japanese master who had emigrated to America after the war. By the age of 25, he had earned a black belt and opened his own school. Hollywood found him by chance. A director was looking for a real martial arts master for a film, and Steven agreed to take a small role. The film became a hit, and other offers followed. But even at the height of his fame, he never forgot his roots. Every weekend, Steven held free classes for children from underprivileged families. He founded a foundation that helped war veterans cope with post-traumatic stress through meditation and martial arts. Over 40 years of charitable work, he helped thousands of people. And this man Dixon had called an old actor. The more he learned, the worse he felt. Steven had been married for 50 years to one woman, a school teacher named Rachel. They had 3 children, all successful professionals, and 8 grandchildren. He had never been involved in scandals, never spoke ill of others, even his critics. "He's a living saint," Dixon told his trainer, Tony Marchetti, during practice, "and I look like a complete fool." Tony, a former boxer from Boston, nodded. "Yeah, you do, but now you have a chance to make it right." "How?" "Show class in the octagon, respect him, fight fair, and if you lose, accept defeat with dignity. And if I win?" Tony looked at him seriously. "Then help him up, hug him, and tell him he's a hero. Show people that you've learned respect." But Dixon knew it wasn't that simple. Every day brought new humiliations. Comedy shows made sketches about him. Late-night talk shows invited experts to explain why he was sure to lose. Even his former opponents spoke out against him. "Dixon has always been arrogant," Jacob Miller said in an ESPN interview. "But what he did to Steven Seagal crosses all boundaries. Steven is a legend who deserves respect." The worst part was that Dixon was starting to believe everything they said about him. Maybe he really was an arrogant jerk. Maybe he deserved what was happening to him. 3 days before the fight, something unexpected happened. Dixon was training in the gym when he saw an interview with Steven Seagal on television. It was the first interview he had given since accepting the challenge. The journalist asked, "Mr. Seagal, what do you think of Dixon Hanta's remarks?" Steven, sitting in a simple wooden chair in his home in the Oregon mountains, replied calmly, "I think this is a young man who has lost his way. Anger and arrogance consume the soul from within. I've seen many such cases. Are you angry with him?" "Anger is a poison we drink, hoping someone else will be poisoned," Steven replied with a gentle smile. "I'm not angry. I pity him." Pity? Imagine having all the money in the world, all the fame, all the fans, yet being so unhappy inside that you have to demean others to feel significant. That's not strength. That's weakness. Dixon turned off the television and sat on the bench, resting his head in his hands. The old man was right. Behind all the money, fame, and fans lay emptiness. He couldn't remember the last time he had truly been happy. Each victory brought temporary relief, but then doubts, fears, and the need to prove to himself and the world that he was the best return. That night he dreamed of his mother. She was sitting in the kitchen of their old house in Detroit, where they lived when he was a teenager. A pot of soup was simmering on the stove, the only meal they could afford for 3 days. "Son," she said in his dream, "I didn't raise you to hurt good people." "Mom, I didn't mean to." "Whether you meant to or not doesn't matter. What matters is what you will do now. You have a chance to correct your mistake. Don't miss it." Dixon woke up in tears. For the first time in many years, he cried, not out of anger or frustration, but from shame and regret. Fight day came faster than he expected. The Boardwalk Arena in Atlantic City was packed to capacity. Tickets sold out in hours. The broadcast was breaking viewership records. The whole world wanted to see what would happen when arrogant youth met wise old age. In the locker room, Dixon sat alone, trying to focus. His hands trembled, not from fear but from nervousness. He understood that this was not just a fight. It was a trial of his character, broadcast live to millions of viewers. Tony entered and sat next to him. "How's it going, champ?" "I'm not a champion," Dixon replied quietly. "Champions don't act like I do." "It's good that you understand that. It means there's hope." "Tony, what if I can't hit him? What if I go out there and just can't bring myself to raise my hand against that man?" Tony smiled. "Then you'll become the man your mother wanted you to be." In another locker room, Steven Seagal was preparing. Despite his age, he looked calm and focused. His wife, Rachel, sat beside him, holding his hand. "Are you sure this is right?" she asked. "You haven't fought publicly in 20 years. "That boy needs a lesson," Steven replied, "but not the one everyone else thinks." "What kind?" "A lesson in mercy. A lesson that true strength lies not in the ability to inflict pain, but in the ability to heal." Their son, David, now a grown man with children of his own, entered the locker room. "Dad, the whole family is here. The kids are worried." "Tell them Grandpa's about to teach a lesson in kindness," Steven said with a smile. "Sometimes the most important lessons are taught without words." When the fighter's entrance was announced, the arena erupted. Dixon came out first to the familiar cheers of fans, but something had changed. Usually the crowd welcomed him as a hero, but today the reaction was mixed. Half cheered for him, half against. He walked to the octagon slowly, for the first time in his career, feeling no confidence. Usually, he stepped into the ring like a predator ready to hunt. Today, he felt like a man going to confession. Then Steven Seagal appeared. The arena fell silent for a moment, then erupted in applause. The 70-year-old man walked with a confident stride, dressed in simple black shorts and a plain tank top. His gray hair was tied back in a ponytail, his face calm and focused. But the most striking thing was in his eyes. There was no anger, hatred, or desire for revenge. Only calm determination and something resembling compassion. When both fighters were in the octagon, referee Dan Miragliotta, a veteran with 30 years of experience, gathered them in the center for instructions. Gentlemen, you know the rules. This is a charity match, one round lasting 15 minutes. Fight fair, protect yourselves at all times. Touch gloves and go to your corners. Dixon extended his glove, but when Steven touched it with his, something strange happened. The old man looked him straight in the eyes and very quietly said, "Your mother would be proud of you if she saw what you could be." Dixon froze. How did he know about his mother? But there was no time for questions. The referee was already separating them to their corners. The gong sounded and the fight began. Dixon moved cautiously, studying his opponent. Steven stood in the center of the octagon in a classic Aikido stance. Feet shoulder-width apart, hands relaxed but ready for action. He didn't look like a man preparing for a fight, more like a teacher waiting for a student. Dixon threw a few quick jabs, testing the reaction. Steven evaded them with minimal movements, as if dancing. His body moved smoothly, without jerks like water flowing around rocks. "Come on, Dixon!" shouted the fans. "Show him!" But something stopped him from launching a full attack. Perhaps it was Steven's eyes. There was no fear in them, only understanding and patience. Or maybe it was the voice of his conscience finally breaking through years of arrogance. Steven stepped forward. "You're holding back," he said calmly, loud enough for Dixon to hear over the crowd noise. "Why?" Dixon didn't answer, but tried to execute a jab-hook combination. Steven caught his hand at the moment of impact, gently redirecting the energy and letting go. It wasn't a painful hold or an attempt to injure, just a demonstration of control. "You can do better," said Steven. "Show me the real you." The crowd began to stir. They came to see a fight, but were witnessing something resembling a strange dance. Dixon attacked, Steven defended or evaded, but no one was trying to inflict serious harm. In the 5th minute, something changed. Frustrated by his inability to hit his opponent, Dixon decided to up the tempo. He unleashed a series of quick strikes, then attempted a takedown. That's when Steven showed why he was respected worldwide in martial arts. When Dixon tried to grab his legs, Steven used his own momentum against him. He didn't fight the force, he redirected it. One fluid motion, and Dixon, losing his balance, fell onto his back. Steven didn't hold him down, didn't try to finish him off. He simply stood over him with an outstretched hand, offering to help him up. The arena erupted. No one expected to see such a thing. Dixon, lying on his back, looked at the outstretched hand and saw not mockery, but a sincere offer of help. He took Steven's hand and allowed him to help him up. In that moment, something broke inside him, not in a bad way, but like a dam breaking, releasing everything that had been held back for so long. "I'm sorry," he said, loud enough for the microphones to catch. "I'm sorry for what I said. You didn't deserve that." Steven smiled. "I know, and I forgive you." "Why?" Dixon asked, tears in his voice. "Why are you so kind to me?" "Because once I was young and foolish too," Steven replied, "and someone showed me mercy instead of cruelty. It's time to pass that gift on." The referee watched this scene, unsure how to react. Technically, the fight was still ongoing, but what was happening transcended a typical sporting competition. Dixon straightened up and did something no one expected. He took off his gloves, approached Steven, and hugged him. "Teach me," he whispered. "Teach me to be better." The arena fell silent. 30,000 spectators, millions of viewers worldwide witnessed a moment that changed not only one fighter's career, but their own understanding of what it means to be strong. Steven hugged him back. "Lesson 1, he said quietly. "True strength is knowing when not to use it." The referee, bewildered, declared the fight a technical draw, but no one cared. People rose from their seats, applauding not for a winner or a loser, but for the human moment of genuine remorse and forgiveness. In the locker room after the fight, Dixon sat next to Stephen, still not believing what had happened. "What now?" he asked. "Now the real work begins," Stephen replied. "Changing yourself is much harder than defeating an opponent in the octagon." "Are you really ready to teach me?" Stephen nodded. "But not here. Come to Oregon. We'll start with the basics." "What basics?" "Humility, discipline, respect. All the things that make a person not just a good fighter, but a good human being." Dixon looked at his hands. Hands that had brought him fame and money but had almost destroyed his soul. "And what if I can't change? What if this is just who I am?" "Everyone can change," Stephen said gently, "but only if they truly want to. The question is, do you want to?" Dixon closed his eyes, recalling his mother's face from his dream. "Yes," he said, "I want to." That night, sports news around the world reported not on the fight, but on a moment of humanity that surpassed any sporting result. The hashtag #RealStrength became a trend on social media. People shared stories of how forgiveness had changed their lives. But the most important thing happened a week later. Dixon flew to Portland and made his way to Stephen's home in the mountains. It was a simple wooden structure surrounded by pines and silence. No luxury, just what was necessary for living. "Welcome," Stephen said, greeting him at the door. "Ready to begin?" "Ready," Dixon replied, and for the first time in many years, he was truly ready to learn, rather than teach others. Their first lesson began not in the gym, but in the garden. Stephen showed him how to care for the plants. "Do you understand the connection between gardening and martial arts?" he asked. Dixon shook his head. "Both require patience, respect for natural processes, and an understanding that true growth happens slowly from within." They worked in silence, their hands digging into the earth, planting seeds that would sprout only weeks or months later. "This is lesson number 1, Stephen said when they finished. Learn to value the process more than the result." Dixon nodded, feeling something deep inside him begin to change. This was just the beginning of a long journey, but he knew he was finally moving in the right direction. That night, he called Jessica. "How are you?" she asked. "Better," he replied honestly. "Much better." "I saw the fight. Mom would be proud." "Yeah," Dixon said, looking at the stars through the guest room window. "I think she would be." And for the first time in many years, he fell asleep without the feeling of emptiness in his chest, knowing that tomorrow would be another day to become better than yesterday. But the morning brought an unexpected call that turned everything upside down. "Dixon," Richard Koss's voice trembled with rage. "You need to return to New York immediately. Nike has terminated your contract. All the other sponsors have followed suit. And worst of all," he paused, and in his silence, disaster echoed. "The league has temporarily suspended you from fighting pending an investigation." Dixon sat up in bed, feeling the world begin to crumble again. "What? On what grounds?" "On the grounds of unsportsmanlike conduct. Your refusal to fight, that sentimental nonsense with the hugs. They call it a violation of the spirit of competition. Stone said you have disgraced the league. Until the investigation is over, you are banned from fighting." Stephen entered the room with a cup of coffee, having heard the raised voices. Dixon looked at him with desperate eyes. "Richard, I'll call you back." He hung up and buried his head in his hands. They took everything, the title, the money, the career, all because I did the right thing. Stephen sat down next to him on the bed. "And how do you feel?" "How do I feel?" Dixon lifted his head, his eyes burning with tears and rage. "I feel like the world has gone mad. For the first time in my life, I acted like a human being, and I'm being punished for it." "Okay," Stephen said calmly. "Okay?" Dixon jumped up. "How can this be okay? I've lost everything." "No," Stephen shook his head. "You've only lost what never truly belonged to you. Money, titles, fame. But you've gained something much more valuable." "What exactly?" "Your true self." Dixon laughed bitterly. "My true self?" "Stephen, I'm an unemployed fighter with no money, no contracts, no future. Is this my true self?" Stephen stood up and walked to the window, which offered a view of the mountains. "Do you know what I did before I became famous?" "No. I worked in a factory, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. The pay barely covered the rent for a room in a basement, but every evening I would go to the dojo and train. Not for money, not for fame, because it made me better. Dixon listened, feeling his anger slowly transforming into something else. When fame came, I almost lost myself, Stephen continued. Hollywood, money, all those temptations. You know what saved me? What? A boy, 8 years old. He came to my dojo after his father beat him half to death. Broken ribs, bruises all over his body. And you know what he told me? Dixon shook his head. He said, Mr. Seagull, teach me to be strong like you in the movies. And I realized then that all my fame is worth exactly as much as the good I can do with it. What happened to the boy? He grew up, became a doctor, saves lives every day, and he still calls me on holidays, thanking me for showing him a different path. Dixon sank back onto the bed. But I don't know how to live without fighting. That's all I had. No, Stephen turned to him. Fighting is what you did, but who you are is something entirely different. In the following days, Dixon immersed himself in training with the desperation of a drowning man grasping for a lifeline. Each morning began with meditation at dawn, followed by physical exercises, studying martial arts philosophy, and more meditation at sunset. But the hardest part wasn't the physical training, it was working with his own soul. Tell me about your father, Stephen said during one of their evening conversations. Dixon tensed. Why? Because the anger you carry inside you didn't start with fame. It's much older. A long silence. Then Dixon spoke, his voice trembling. He left when I was 12, just packed his things and disappeared. Left a note on the kitchen table. I'm not made for family life. And how did you feel? That it was my fault, that I wasn't good enough for him to stay. Stephen nodded. And your whole life, you've been trying to prove that you're good enough? Every victory, every title, an attempt to make your father's ghost proud of you? Tears streamed down Dixon's face. Yes, and you know what's the scariest part? Even when I became a champion, even when the whole world knew my name, inside I still felt like that 12-year-old boy who was abandoned. And now you've lost all your external achievements. How do you feel? Dixon pondered. Strangely enough, relieved, like I can finally stop running. It was then that horror burst into the house, changing everything. Rachel, Stephen's wife, entered the living room pale as chalk, holding a phone. Stephen, her voice trembled. It's the hospital. Jessica. Dixon jumped up. What happened to Jessica? Car accident. She's in intensive care in Detroit. The doctors, they don't know if she'll survive. The world stopped. The only close person he had left was dying thousands of miles away, and he was sitting here, playing at spiritual practices. I need to fly, he said, already heading for the door. I'm flying with you, Stephen said, putting on his jacket. Why? This isn't your problem. Stephen stopped and looked at him with such intensity that Dixon froze. Because this is exactly what teachers are for. Not to show you how to meditate in a calm setting, but to be there when your world is falling apart. The flight to Detroit became the longest 4 hours of Dixon's life. Stephen sat beside him, not trying to comfort him with empty words, just being present. What if she dies? Dixon whispered, staring out the window. What if the last thing she thought about me was that I'm a loser who lost everything? Then you'll have to live with that, Stephen replied honestly. But you'll live as a man who learned to love truly, and that's something she could be proud of. At the hospital, they were met by Dr. Anderson, a weary man with kind eyes. Mr. Hunt, your sister is in critical condition. Head trauma, internal bleeding. The next 24 hours will decide everything. Dixon nodded, not trusting his voice. But there's something else, the doctor added. She was conscious for a while after the accident. She kept repeating your name. She asked me to tell you that she is proud of who you have become. These words shattered the last remnants of his protective barriers. Dixon fell to his knees right in the hospital corridor and cried like he hadn't since childhood. Stephen knelt beside him, placed a hand on his shoulder, and cried too, because shared pain is pain halved. The next day passed in a nightmarish wait. Dixon sat by Jessica's bed, holding her hand and speaking about everything he had wanted to say all these years. Jess, remember how you defended me from bullies at school? You were the size of a sparrow, but you would throw yourself at guys twice your size. I never told you, but that's when I understood what real courage is. The machines beeped, showing weak vital signs. Do you remember Mom? How she sang to us before bed, even when she was sick? I want to be just like both of you. Strong not because I can fight, but because I can love. On the fifth day, Jessica opened her eyes. Dixon? Her voice was weak, but her consciousness was clear. I'm here, he squeezed her hand. I'm not going anywhere. You really have changed, haven't you? This isn't just for the cameras. No, sweetheart, it's real. She smiled weakly. Mom would be so happy. She always knew there was that person inside you. She was just waiting for him to come out. Jess, I need to tell you something. I've lost everything. The title, the money, the career. I have nothing. That's not true, she squeezed his hand with her weak fingers. You have me. You have someone who believes in you without any titles. It was then that an unfamiliar man in an expensive suit entered the room. Tall, gray-haired, with an authoritative face and cold eyes. Dixon Hunt? He asked. Yes. My name is James Griffin. I'm the owner of the new Fight League Warriors Honor. I need to talk to you. Not now, Dixon said, not taking his eyes off his sister. Now, Griffin insisted, because what you did in that octagon is worth more than any title, and I want to build an entire league around those principles. Dixon turned to him. What are you talking about? About honor, about respect, about how martial arts should elevate the human spirit, not just entertain the crowd. Griffin sat down in a chair. After your fight with Stephen Graham, dozens of fighters reached out to me. They are tired of the circus that MMA has become. They want to fight for something greater. What do I care about other fighters? Dixon turned back to Jessica. Because, Jessica whispered, you have a chance to change not just your life, but the lives of others. Griffin continued. I'm offering you the chance to be not just a fighter, but the face of a new philosophy in martial arts. A league where it's not just the strongest who wins, but the one who shows more honor, discipline, and respect for their opponent. And what's the cost? Dixon asked cynically. For you? Nothing. All the fees go to charity. You're fighting not for money, but for the chance to show the world that martial arts can heal, not just hurt. Stephen, who had been silent in the corner all this time, approached the bed. The decision is yours, but remember, sometimes the most important fights happen outside the octagon. Dixon looked at his sister, then at Stephen, then at Griffin. Old instincts battled in his head, the desire for glory, money, recognition, and something new that he had gained over these weeks. There's a condition, he finally said. What is it? Steven Siegel becomes the head coach of the league, and 50% of all revenues goes to programs helping children from disadvantaged families. Griffin smiled. Agreed. But the most important moment came later, when everyone had left, and Dixon was alone with Jessica. Dixon, she said quietly, I need to tell you something about Dad. His body tensed. Jess, not now. Now, because you need to know the truth. She took a breath. He didn't just leave. He was sick. Brain cancer. The doctors said he has 6 months left, and he will become a completely different person. Dixon froze. What? He left so that we would remember him alive, not dying. Mom knew, but she forbade me to tell you until you turned 18. And then you hated him so much that I was afraid to ruin everything. The world turned upside down. All those years of rage, all the attempts to prove his worth to a man who actually loved him, enough to hurt himself to save his son from even greater pain. Where is he buried? Dixon asked in a trembling voice. Woodlawn Cemetery, Plot 73. Mom is buried next to him. That night, Dixon and Stephen went to the cemetery. It was cold and it drizzled, but Dixon stood by the 2 gravestones and for the first time in 30 years spoke to his parents. Dad, he whispered, kneeling in the mud. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't understand. I'm sorry I was angry with you my whole life for what you did out of love. Stephen stood aside, giving him space for forgiveness. Mom, Dixon placed his hand on the second stone. I became the person you wanted to see. Finally. When they returned to the hospital, Jessica was asleep. The doctor said she was recovering, but full recovery would take months. Dixon sat by her bed, holding her hand, and realizing that everything had changed. Not just his career or financial situation, He had changed himself from the inside. "Stephen," he said quietly, "thank you." "For what?" "For showing me that strength is not what you can do to others. It's what you can endure yourself." Stephen smiled. Lesson learned. A year later, Dixon stood in the center of the new octagon of the Warriors Honor League. Before the fight, he and his opponent bowed to each other, just like samurais did centuries ago. After the fight, the winner helped the loser up, and they embraced under the applause of the crowd. In the corner of the hall, in a wheelchair, sat Jessica. Next to her were Stephen and Rachel. They all smiled, watching Dixon become not just the best fighter, but a better person. And somewhere in the sky, if you believe in such things, two parents could finally be proud of their son, not for defeating others, but for conquering the most terrifying opponent, his former self. And when Dixon looked up at the arena ceiling, he could swear he saw their faces in the reflection of the light, smiling at him from the other side. Where there is no pain, only love and pride for a son who had finally come home to his true self. But the story didn't end that evening. The most important part began later. A year and a half later, the Warriors Heart Academy that Dixon opened in the same neighborhood of Detroit where he grew up became a pilgrimage site for lost souls from all over the country. Children came here not only to learn to fight, but also to learn to live. On a rainy October evening, a boy named Tyler Johnson was brought to him. 15 years old, as thin as a stick, with dark circles under his eyes and hatred for the whole world written on his face. A spitting image of Dixon at that age, when pain had yet to find an outlet through fists. "I don't want to be here," Tyler said, crossing his arms over his chest. "The social worker made me." Dixon looked at him and saw himself 30 years ago. "You know what? I didn't want to be here at your age either. I wanted the whole world to fail. Then why are you here? Because someone showed me that anger can be turned into strength, but not the kind of strength you think," Tyler scoffed. "Yeah, sure. Another adult who thinks they know what it's like." Dixon rolled up his shirt sleeve, showing a scar on his forearm. "See this? I got it at 13 when I tried to protect my mother from her latest boyfriend. A bottle to the arm." Tyler's eyes widened. "And this," Dixon pointed to another scar on his neck, "is from a fight in an alley at 16. I thought if I was angry enough, cruel enough, the pain would go away. Did it? No, it just got deeper." Tyler looked down. "I have a dad. I know," Dixon said quietly. "No need to talk." "I know." In the following months, Dixon watched as Tyler slowly thawed. At first, the boy came only because he had to, but gradually something changed. He began to ask questions, participate in training, even smile. Stephen, who was now spending half his time at the academy, worked with Tyler on anger management. "Anger is a secondary emotion," he explained. "There's always pain underneath it. We need to get to the source." One evening, when all the students had already left, Tyler stayed behind. He sat in the corner of the hall, hugging his knees, and cried. Dixon approached and sat down next to him, saying nothing. "He did it again," Tyler whispered. "Came home drunk and I couldn't stop him. I'm not strong enough." "Tyler, listen to me," Dixon turned to him. "Your job is not to protect your mother from your father. That's not a child's job." "Then whose is it?" "Adults, the police, social services, people who are trained for this. But they do nothing. Then we will find those who will." And they found them. Dixon reached out to his contacts in the police, to lawyers who work pro bono, to women's shelters. After several months of gathering evidence and working with social services, Tyler's father was finally arrested, and the boy and his mother moved to a safe place. "Why did you do this?" Tyler asked. "Why did you help us?" Dixon looked at him for a long time, recalling everything he had been through himself. "Because once, no one helped me, and I don't want another child to grow up with that kind of pain." But the real turning point came during the academy tournament. Tyler was set to fight a boy his age from another school. The opponent was stronger, more experienced, and Tyler was losing almost the entire match. In the final seconds of the round, Tyler found an opening for a powerful strike that could knock out his opponent. Dixon saw the boy preparing to deliver it as old fury flared in his eyes. But instead of striking, Tyler stopped, helped his opponent regain his balance, and ended the match with a respectful embrace. He lost on points, but he won something far more important. "Why didn't you hit him?" Dixon asked after the match. Because he's not my enemy, Tyler replied. My enemy is the person I could become if I hadn't learned to control myself. At that moment, Dixon realized that the circle had closed. The pain he had carried all his life finally made sense. It was not a curse, but a gift, the ability to understand other lost children and show them the way home. But the most astonishing thing awaited ahead. A few months later, a man came to the academy whom Dixon never expected to see again. Marcus Stone, the very president of the league who had stripped him of his title. Dixon, he said, entering the hall where training was taking place, I need to talk to you. They stepped into a small office. Stone looked older, tired. I came to apologize, he said without preamble. Dixon raised an eyebrow. For what? For taking your title. For not understanding back then that you did something revolutionary. Stone sat in the chair opposite. Do you know what happened to our league after you left? No. It turned into a circus. Fighters are trying to outdo each other in rudeness and aggression. Ratings are falling, sponsors are leaving, people are tired of the spectacle. Dixon listened in silence. And your league, Warriors Honor, it's changing everything. Kids all over the country are asking their parents to sign them up with you. Adults want to learn your approach. You didn't just create a sport, you created a movement. And what do you want? Stone pulled documents from his briefcase. I want you to come back, become the president of our league. Full freedom of action, unlimited budget for charity, the right to change all the rules. Dixon looked at the papers but did not take them. What's the catch? No catch. I admit I was wrong, and I want to correct my mistake. A long silence, then Dixon shook his head. No. What? I said no. Stone looked puzzled. But why? This is a chance to change all of sports. Dixon stood up and approached the window, from where he could see the training hall. There, Tyler was teaching the newcomers the basics of Aikido, patiently correcting their movements. Because I am already changing sports, one child at a time, and that is more important than any titles or leagues. Dixon, do you understand the power I am offering you? I understand, and that is exactly why I refuse. He turned to Stone. Power corrupts, and I have already been corrupted by it once. I won't make that mistake again. Stone gathered his documents and stood up. If you change your mind, I won't change my mind. After Stone left, Dixon was alone in the office. He thought about the journey he had taken, from an arrogant champion to a man who found his true calling in helping others. There was a knock at the door. Stephen entered. I heard the conversation, he said. Are you proud of your decision? Yes. For the first time in a long while, I am 100% sure that I did the right thing. Stephen smiled. Do you know the difference between wisdom and knowledge? What is it? Knowledge is when you know how to get what you want. Wisdom is when you understand what you truly want. That night, Dixon went to the cemetery. He did this every month, visiting his parents' graves, telling them about his life, the children he taught, the people he saved. Dad, Mom, he said, standing between the two gravestones, today I was offered everything I lost back. The title, the fame, the money. And you know what? I didn't hesitate at all. The wind rustled the leaves on the trees, as if nature itself approved of his words. Because I realized I never lost anything. I just finally found what I had been searching for my whole life. Purpose, meaning, a way to make the world better. He knelt down and placed his hands on the cold stone. Thank you for the pain that taught me compassion, for the abandonment that taught me to value closeness, for all the mistakes that led me to the right path. In the silence of the night cemetery, Dixon felt something he had never felt before. Complete, absolute peace. He knew who he was. He knew why he lived. And for the first time in his life, that was enough. Years later, when Tyler Johnson became a doctor and opened a clinic for children from underprivileged families, when hundreds of Dixon's other students spread across the world carrying with them lessons of honor and compassion, when the Warriors Heart Academy became a model for thousands of similar schools around the globe, people asked Dixon about the secret of his success. There is no secret, he always replied. It's just that one day I realized that defeating others is easy. The hardest thing is to defeat yourself, and even harder is to help someone else defeat themselves. And every time he said these words somewhere deep in his soul, he heard Steven Seagal's voice. Lesson learned. But the most important lesson Dixon received on the last day of his life, many years later. He lay in a hospital room, surrounded by hundreds of people whose lives he had changed. Tyler held one of his hands. Jessica held the other. Stephen, now very old, sat in a chair nearby. "Mr. Hunt," said a young nurse, "you have many visitors. Would you like to see them?" Dixon looked out the window, where the sun was setting behind the horizon, painting the sky in golden hues. "No," he said quietly. "I have everything I need." And in the final moments of his life, looking at the faces of the people he loved, and who loved him not for titles or money, but for who he had become, Dixon Hunt finally understood the true meaning of victory. Victory is not what you take from others. Victory is what you give.